The smell of roast chicken and garlic mashed potatoes should have been comforting. Instead, it made my stomach churn as I sat at what used to be our family dining table, watching my sister Sarah play the perfect hostess to our parents and extended family. The same dining table where we'd shared countless meals as children, where Mom had helped us with homework, where Dad had announced his promotion 15 years ago. Now it sat in Sarah's sprawling suburban home, along with everything else that had once belonged to our family. "More wine, everyone?" Sarah's voice rang with artificial cheerfulness as she moved around the table, her designer dress swishing against the hardwood floors that had cost more than most people's cars. She looked every inch the successful real estate mogul she'd become, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile camera-ready. But I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the way she avoided looking directly at me. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair, hyper-aware of my worn jeans and faded sweater among the sea of business, casual, and cocktail attire. 3 months of unemployment will do that to your wardrobe and your confidence. But I was here because Mom had insisted, practically begged me to come to Sarah's housewarming party. "It's important we stay together as a family, especially now," Mom had said on the phone, her voice strained with the effort of maintaining normalcy. Sarah worked so hard to make this dinner special. What Mom didn't say, what none of us had talked about directly, was how Sarah had worked so hard to acquire this house in the first place. "Jamie, you're awfully quiet tonight," Uncle Ron commented from across the table, his third glass of wine making his words slightly slurred. "How's the job hunt going?" The table fell silent, except for the gentle clink of silverware against china. I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me, waiting for my response. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. "Still looking," I managed, forcing a smile. "The market's tough right now." "Well, you know what they say," Sarah interjected, settling back into her seat at the head of the table, Dad's old spot. "Sometimes life forces us to make difficult decisions. Sometimes we have to choose between being practical and being sentimental." The words hit me like a physical blow. She was talking about the house, this house, and she knew it. We all knew it. 6 months ago, when Dad had his stroke and the medical bills started piling up, when Mom couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments on their dream home, Sarah had swooped in with a solution. She'd offered to buy the house from them at fair market value, which happened to be about 60% of what it was actually worth, thanks to some creative market analysis from her real estate connections. Mom and Dad, desperate and grateful, had accepted without question. What they didn't know, what I discovered 3 weeks later through a mutual friend in Satoe Mio's real estate, was that Sarah had immediately turned around and sold the property to a developer for triple what she'd paid my parents. The developer had torn down our childhood home within a month, planning to build luxury condos on the lot. But Sarah hadn't kept the windfall. Oh no, that would have been too obvious. Instead, she'd used the profit to buy this showplace, a mansion in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, complete with a wine cellar, home theater, and guest house. And now she was hosting family dinner in the shadow of her success, built on our parents' desperation. I'd tried to tell Mom and Dad what I'd discovered, but Sarah had beaten me to it. She'd spun a story about me being jealous, unstable, lashing out because of my job loss. "Jamie's been struggling lately," she'd told them with just the right amount of concern in her voice. "I think the stress is getting to be too much." "This is such a beautiful home, Sarah," Aunt Linda was saying, running her hand along the polished mahogany of the table. "You must be so proud." "I am," Sarah replied, her eyes finally meeting mine across the table. There was a challenge there, a dare. "I worked very hard for everything I have. I made smart choices, took calculated risks. Some people might call that cold, but I call it survival. The passive aggression was suffocating. I took a large gulp of wine, feeling it burn down my throat. "It's amazing what people will do for money," I said quietly, unable to stop myself. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah's smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "What was that, Jamie?" "Nothing," I muttered, but the damage was done. I could feel Dad's disappointed look, Mom's anxious energy radiating from across the table. "No, please," Sarah said, setting down her wineglass with deliberate care. "If you have something to say, say it. We're all family here." The irony was suffocating. Family. As if family meant anything to her beyond what she could extract from it. "I said it's amazing what people will do for money," I repeated, louder this time. "How they'll justify hurting the people closest to them as long as they get what they want." "Jamie," Mom warned, her voice tight with stress, "please don't start." But I was past caring. 3 months of watching my parents struggle in their tiny rental apartment. 3 months of knowing the truth while everyone praised Sarah's generosity in helping them through a difficult time. 3 months of being painted as the unstable, jealous sibling. It all came boiling up at once. "Did everyone know that our childhood home was bulldozed last month?" I asked, looking around the table at my relatives' confused faces. "Sarah bought it from Mom and Dad for a fraction of its value, then flipped it to developers. She made enough profit to buy this place." The silence was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the soft hum of the expensive air conditioning system. "Jamie, that's enough," Dad said firmly, but his voice lacked conviction. I could see the question in his eyes, the first crack in his faith in Sarah's version of events. "Is it true?" Mom asked quietly, looking at Sarah with something that might have been hope. Hope that her daughter wasn't capable of such calculated cruelty. Sarah's mask finally slipped. The perfect hostess facade crumbled, replaced by cold fury. "How dare you?" she hissed at me. "How dare you come into my home and spread lies about me? You're jealous because I've made something of myself while you're still living paycheck to paycheck, when you even have a paycheck." "Sarah!" Uncle Ron tried to intervene, but she was just getting started. "No, let me finish," she snapped. "I'm tired of walking on eggshells around Jamie's feelings. I'm tired of pretending that her failures are anyone's fault but her own. Yes, I bought the house from Mom and Dad. Yes, I made a profit when I sold it. That's called business. That's called not being stupid with money." She stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a harsh screech. "I worked my ass off to get where I am today, while Jamie was busy feeling sorry for herself. I saw an opportunity and I took it. I'm not going to apologize for being successful." "You stole from our parents," I said, standing to face her. My voice was shaking with rage. "You took advantage of them when they were desperate, and you made a fortune off their pain." "I helped them," Sarah shouted. "I gave them a way out of a situation they couldn't handle. If I hadn't stepped in, they would have lost everything to the bank. At least this way they got something. A fraction of what it was worth. More than they would have gotten otherwise." The rest of the family sat frozen, watching our confrontation like spectators at a tennis match. Mom was crying silently, her mascara running down her cheeks. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "The house was worth over $800,000, I continued, my voice getting louder with each word. "You paid them $300. You sold it for over $2 million. You made $1.5 million off our parents' desperation, and then you had the nerve to use that money to buy this palace while they're living in a 1-bedroom apartment." Sarah's face was flushed red with anger and something else. Guilt, maybe, or just fury at being exposed. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had carried moments before. "You don't understand how real estate works, how market values fluctuate." "I understand exactly how it works," I interrupted. "I also understand that you could have paid them fair market value and still made a healthy profit. But you chose to maximize your gain at their expense. You chose to screw over your own parents." That's when she hit me. It wasn't a dramatic movie slap. It was a closed fist punch to my shoulder that sent me stumbling backward into the wall. The antique mirror hanging there rattled from the impact. "Sarah!" Dad roared, finally finding his voice. But Sarah wasn't done. She grabbed me by the arm and started dragging me toward the front door, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin. "Get out!" she snarled. "Get out of my house!" "You want to come here and attack me? Accuse me of being some kind of monster? You can do it from the street." I tried to pull away, but Sarah had always been stronger than me, and rage was giving her extra strength. She yanked open the front door and shoved me hard, sending me stumbling down the front steps. I barely caught myself before falling completely. "And don't come back," she yelled from the doorway. "You're not welcome here anymore. You want to spread lies about me? You want to poison our family against me? You can do it somewhere else." The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. I stood there on the sidewalk in the growing darkness, my shoulder throbbing, my pride in tatters, listening to the muffled voices of my family through the expensive windows. As I walked to my beat-up Honda Civic, parked conspicuously among the BMWs and Lexuses lining the street, my mind was already racing. Sarah thought she'd won. She thought she'd silenced me, dismissed me, pushed me back into the shadows where I belonged. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed. The next morning, I called in sick to the temp agency where I'd been picking up occasional work and drove to the downtown library. I needed internet access, printing capabilities, and most importantly, I needed a place where I could think clearly without the suffocating atmosphere of my tiny studio apartment. I'd been angry for months, but last night had crystallized that anger into something focused and sharp. Sarah wanted to play games? Fine, but she'd chosen the wrong opponent. The first thing I did was verify everything I thought I knew about the house sale: property records, tax assessments, recent sales in the neighborhood. It was all public information if you knew where to look. What I found was even worse than I'd suspected. The house hadn't just been worth $800,000. That was the conservative estimate I'd gotten from my friend. According to comparable sales in the area, it had actually been worth closer to $900,000. And Sarah hadn't just sold it once for a huge profit. She'd sold it to the developer for $2.3 million, then taken a stake in the development company as part of the deal. When the luxury condos were finished and sold, her total profit would be closer to $3 million. $3 million! From our parents' desperation. But that wasn't the most interesting thing I discovered. The most interesting thing was that Sarah had used a shell company to make the initial purchase from our parents. On paper, it looked like they'd sold to Westside Property Solutions LLC, not to their own daughter. This had allowed Sarah to lowball them while maintaining plausible deniability. After all, she was just the agent helping them navigate a difficult sale to an interested investor. Except Sarah was Westside Property Solutions LLC. She was the sole owner, registered the company 3 days before making the offer on the house. This wasn't just taking advantage of family, this was fraud. I spent the next 6 hours documenting everything, creating a timeline, gathering evidence. By the time I left the library that evening, I had a folder thick with printouts and a flash drive full of documents that told the story of my sister's betrayal in excruciating detail. But evidence was just the beginning. Sarah had built her success on image. The successful businesswoman, the loving daughter who'd helped her parents in their time of need, the family-first person who always did the right thing. Her client base, her social standing, her entire identity was wrapped up in that image. It was time to introduce the world to the real Sarah. I started small, a few anonymous tips to local business journalists about an interesting story involving questionable real estate practices, a detailed post on a consumer watchdog forum about predatory behavior in the residential real estate market, strategic comments on social media posts from Sarah's brokerage sharing concerns about their business practices. Within a week, Sarah's phone was ringing. A reporter from the Business Journal wanted to interview her about allegations of fraud. The State Real Estate Commission had received a complaint and opened an investigation. Her brokerage's managing partner was asking uncomfortable questions about her recent transactions. But I was just getting started. The beauty of social media is that information spreads fast, and Sarah had been very active in building her online presence. Professional networking sites, Instagram posts from luxury properties, Facebook updates about her success, it all painted a picture of someone who'd built wealth very quickly in a relatively short time period. I created detailed posts outlining exactly how that wealth had been built, complete with documentation. I tagged every person I could find who'd ever done business with Sarah, every colleague, every client who'd left a positive review. I shared the posts in local community groups, real estate investor forums, anywhere people might be interested in knowing how Sarah Westbrook really operated. The response was swift and devastating. Comments poured in from other clients who began to question their own deals with Sarah. Had they been lowballed too? Had she represented their interests or her own? Real estate agents began distancing themselves from her. Potential clients canceled appointments. But the most satisfying response came from our family. Mom called me on a Thursday evening, her voice thick with tears. "Jamie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course, Mom." "Is it true what you said about the house? About Sarah making all that money?" I walked her through everything I'd discovered, keeping my voice gentle, but not hiding any of the painful details. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "She lied to us," Mom whispered. "She looked us in the eye and lied to us about everything." "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." "No," she said firmly. "Don't apologize." "You tried to tell us and we didn't listen. We should have listened." The conversation with Dad was harder. He'd always been Sarah's favorite, always proud of her business acumen. Accepting that she'd used that same business sense to exploit him was a blow to his ego as much as his heart. But the evidence was overwhelming, and eventually, even Dad had to acknowledge the truth. The real turning point came when Sarah tried to do damage control. She called a family meeting, at a restaurant this time, neutral territory, and attempted to justify her actions. "I was protecting you," she insisted, looking at our parents with desperate sincerity. The market was volatile, the house needed work, there were no guarantees you'd get asking price if we'd listed it traditionally. I took on all the risk. "By using a shell company?" Dad asked quietly. "By hiding the fact that you were the buyer?" Sarah's carefully constructed explanations crumbled under direct questioning. When she couldn't justify her actions logically, she fell back on emotional manipulation. Tears, accusations, attempts to paint herself as the victim. "I've worked so hard for everything I have," she sobbed. "And now, Jamie wants to destroy it all because she's jealous. She wants to tear down our family because she can't stand to see me succeed." But her tears fell on deaf ears. The evidence spoke louder than her emotional appeals. The final blow came when the State Real Estate Commission completed their investigation. Sarah had violated multiple regulations in her handling of the transaction. Her license was suspended pending a formal hearing, and she faced potential criminal charges for fraud. Her brokerage terminated her immediately. The developer, nervous about the negative publicity, bought out her stake in the condo project at a significant discount. Clients fled en masse, taking their business to competitors who hadn't made headlines for exploiting their own parents. Within 3 months, Sarah had gone from successful real estate mogul to industry pariah. She had to sell the mansion, ironically, for less than she'd paid for it, thanks to the scandal's impact on her ability to negotiate. She moved into a modest apartment across town and took a job at a discount real estate office that was desperate enough to hire someone with her reputation. But perhaps the most satisfying justice was the simplest. She had to pay our parents back. The combination of legal pressure, family pressure, and public scrutiny made it impossible for her to keep the profits she'd made from their desperation. She wrote them a check for the difference between what she'd paid and what the house had actually been worth, plus interest. Mom and Dad used the money to put a down payment on a small house in a nice neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs, and they'd bought it honestly. 6 months after that disastrous family dinner, I got a call from Sarah. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "I know it was you," she said, without preamble. Her voice was flat, defeated. "I don't know what you mean." "The investigation, the media attention, all of it. I know you orchestrated everything." I let the silence stretch between us. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why did you have to destroy everything?" "I didn't destroy anything, Sarah. I just made sure people knew the truth about what you did." "I helped them," she said, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore. "I gave them a way out." "You stole from them." "You stole from our parents when they needed help the most, and then you built a fortune on their pain." Another long silence. "I lost everything," she whispered. "No," I said firmly. "You lost everything you built on lies and theft. Everything you actually earned. Everything you achieved honestly. That's still yours. The question is, how much of your success was actually yours to begin with?" She hung up without answering. A year later, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. She looked older, tired, but oddly more human than she had in years. The artificial perfection was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine humility. "How are Mom and Dad?" she asked quietly. "They're good." "Happy in their new place?" She nodded, looking down at her cart full of generic brands and discount items. "I've been thinking about calling them," she said. "Maybe trying to, I don't know, apologize properly." "That's up to you," I said. "But if you do, make sure you mean it. Don't do it because you want something from them or because you want forgiveness you haven't earned. Do it because you understand what you did wrong and you want to make amends." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Genuine regret. "I was so focused on winning," she said, "on being successful, on proving I was smart and capable. I forgot that some things are more important than winning." "It's not too late to remember," I said softly. As I walked away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The anger that had driven me for so long, the need for justice, the desire for revenge, it was all gone, replaced by something that felt like peace. Sarah had learned her lesson the hard way, but she had learned it. Our parents had gotten justice, and more importantly, they'd learned the truth about what had happened to them. The family had been shaken, damaged, but not destroyed. And I had learned something too. Revenge isn't about destroying someone, it's about making sure that actions have consequences, that truth wins over lies, that justice prevails even when it takes time and effort and sacrifice. Sometimes the best revenge is simply making sure the world knows who someone really is. Sarah did call our parents eventually. The conversation was long, painful, and necessary. She didn't ask for forgiveness, she just apologized, acknowledged what she'd done, and asked if there was any way to begin earning back their trust. It would take time, maybe years, maybe forever. But it was a start. And as I sat in my own small apartment, paid for with honest work, modest but mine, I realized that sometimes the most satisfying ending isn't the one where the villain gets completely destroyed. Sometimes it's the one where they finally understand what they've lost and why they deserved to lose it. That understanding, that genuine regret, that hard-won wisdom, those are the kind of consequences that actually change people. And that's a revenge worth having.